Hello and welcome to Network Africa. Coming up on the program, power changes hands in the African Union after a two-day summit. What does this mean for the Union? First on the new AU chairman's agenda is for the Union to pull out from the ICC, but just how realistic is that? And later on, 3 suspects are arrested in Tanzania in connection with the murder of a British pilot who was killed over the weekend. Hello again and welcome to Network Africa on Channels Television with me, Cynthia Are. Happy New Month to all our viewers and we hope things go well for you in February. Just before we bring you more details regarding the appointment of the new AU chairperson, here's a quick summary of the stories which topped the news this past weekend.
A Somalia-born man who U.S. prosecutors accused of abandoning Britain where he had been a citizen to return to the country of his birth, where he joined the Islamic militant group Al-Shabaab, has been sentenced to 9 years in prison. 26-year-old Mahdi Hashi was sentenced by U.S. District Judge John Gleeson in Brooklyn, New York, in light of his guilty plea in May to a charge of conspiring to provide material support to Al-Shabaab. He will be deported after they are released from prison. Then the United Nations sung praises to the Somalia government for reaching an agreement on a model for the country's electoral process to form a bicameral federal parliament this year.
This morning, a decision was taken by the Somali cabinet on the electoral model to be used later this year. This is the culmination of almost 6 months' intense consultations. It may be a watershed moment, marking the growing political maturity of a federal Somalia.
Somalia's last held elections in 2012 was the first since 1991, when warlords ousted President Mohamed Said Barre, plunging the country into years of conflict. Finally, after the much-anticipated 2-day African Union summit which held in Ethiopia, the Union has come to several decisions, ranging from a change in leadership of the Union from President Mugabe of Zimbabwe to President Idris Deby of Chad, to a decision to pull out from the International Criminal Court. There was a huge focus on the rights of women.
We must continue to place our people and their basic human rights at the center of Agenda 2063. This includes our people's rights to education, to food, nutrition, to health, to safe water, sanitation, to jobs.
More on the just concluded AU summit now. It's no longer news that the president of Chad has taken over from President Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe as the chairman of the African Union. However, what is on everyone's mind is how his tenure will differ from that of his predecessor, who welcomed the move. Here's an excerpt of the statement made by his predecessor, President Robert Mugabe. He says, "Whatever support you want from me, I will still be there until God says come. Then I'll go and join the others. But as long as I'm still alive, I will still have the punch." The 63-year-old President Deby of Chad is one of Africa's longest ruling presidents, who emerged leader of the North Central African state in December of 1990 after the war which ousted the regime of Hissène Habre. Here's more on the newly elected AU chairperson. He was born in 1952, was president of Chad, and has been president of Chad since the year 1990. He was the head of the Patriotic Salvation Movement. He won elections in 1995 and 2001, and won elections in 2006 and 2011 after elimination of term limits. He's also been accused of misuse of philanthropic funds, and those funds which were intended for famine were alleged to have been used to purchase weapons to keep him in power. In 2006, Chad also topped the list of Forbes as one of the most corrupt countries. Now, the AU tabled a lot of issues, including women's rights, and made several changes. But with the way things played out this year, it came across as though the more pressing issues were relegated to the background. I'm referring to the South Sudan crisis and the crisis in Burundi. For that reason, the UN Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, called on the African leaders to act and speak in one voice.
This is a matter of human dignity and human rights. The longer this situation continues, the more people will be killed and affected. And we have almost 1 million people who have been affected, refugees and displaced people. We cannot wait any longer. That's why it's a matter of urgency that I'm urging African leaders to act in one voice, and also particularly urging President Nkurunziza and his government to listen very carefully and engaging in inclusive dialogue.
UN Secretary General Mr. Ban Ki-moon. I'm joined from the nation's capital by a former Chief of Staff to the AU Chairman, Ambassador John Shinkai. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us on Network Africa.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ambassador. Thank you very much. Now, quickly, if you can, power has changed hands and a lot has happened. For instance, the AU has opted to shelve the AU troops, which is in contradiction to a stance which it took earlier. Bearing this in mind, what do we expect to see from the new AU chairperson?
Sorry, the line was not very clear. I didn't get it.
I'm asking about what we should expect from the new AU chairperson. We're seeing a lot that's gone on since he emerged the new chairman.
Yes, so President Deby is a well-known leader on the continent. He's also a very determined person, and I know that from the role that he has played on the continent, he's going to defend the interests of the continent as much as he can. And I think that irrespective of what might be said of him, he's a true African, and he will work with his colleagues on the continent to take the organization forward.
Now, Ambassador, it's starting to come across as though he will actually work in the interest of the continent, but at the expense of the relationship with the international community. For instance, the troops the international community, that's the UN, were pushing for Burundi to accept, AU has shelved that option, and we're now seeing that it's also looking to pull out of the ICC. So even though he's going to support the interest of the continent, is it worth coming at the expense of a relationship with the international community?
No, I think we should be clear about it. The decision for the AU not to send a force to Burundi at the moment is not a decision taken by the new AU chairperson. It's also a collective decision by other leaders as well. And that's in taking cognizance of the realities of the ground. The Burundian president and government have said that they do not want an AU force, and if it comes, it will be considered as an invasion force, which it will oppose. In other circumstances, it's difficult for the African Union to deploy any force without the agreement of the Burundian government. And that's why I understand that a delegation is going to engage with the Burundian government. If the UN wants, it is the UN Security Council that can take a mandatory decision for a force to be imposed on Burundi. And while the UN Secretary General is clear in what he says, I think that he can assist the AU by working towards a UN Security Council decision that will be binding on Burundi and which will facilitate participation or implementation by the African Union.
Ambassador John Shinkai, the former Chief of Staff to the AU Chairman, thank you very much for joining us on Network Africa. Still to come on Network Africa. Photos emerge which support the claims of eyewitnesses in Burundi who spoke of mass graves. Details